Hello, everyone. My name's Iman. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we're covering Chapter 2 for our MCAT Behavioral Science playlist, and this chapter is titled Sensation and Perception. In this chapter, we're going to cover the following objectives. We're going to start by talking about the difference between sensation and perception. Along the way, we're going to discuss sensory receptors, sensory thresholds, signal detection theory, and sensory adaptation. These ideas are going to help explain how information from the environment is detected and how that information eventually reaches our conscious awareness. Once we have that foundation, we're going to move into vision. We're going to learn how the eye collects light from the environment, how that information travels through the visual pathway, and finally, how the brain turns those signals into the images that we experience every day. From there, we're going to turn our attention to hearing and the vestibular sense. We're going to examine the structure of the ear, and we're going to go over how sound is converted into neural signals. We're also going to discuss how the body maintains balance and spatial orientation. We're then going to broaden our discussion to include several other sensory systems, including smell, taste, somatosensation, and the kinesthetic sense. Together, these systems provide information about both the world around us and about the state of our own bodies. Finally, we're going to finish the chapter by discussing object recognition and the Gestalt principles of perception. Here, we're going to see that perception involves a lot more than just detecting sensory information. The brain also has to organize and interpret that information in ways that allow us to make sense of the world around us. Now, with that introduction, we're ready to begin with our first objective, sensation and perception. Before we're able to talk about vision, hearing, smell, taste, and the rest of the sensory systems, we first need to learn the difference between sensation and perception. At a first glance, these terms might seem like they're describing really similar things. After all, whenever you look at an object or hear a sound or taste food, the experience feels seamless. It feels like you're simply observing the world around you. But from the perspective of neuroscience, that experience can actually be divided into multiple stages. To start, think about what is happening right now as you watch this video. The light that's reaching your eyes is not a picture. The sound that's reaching your ears is not a voice. The chemicals that create a smell are not odors. In fact, the outside world contains no colors, no sounds, no tastes, and no smells in the way that we consciously experience them. Instead, the environment contains physical stimuli. Light exists as electromagnetic radiation. Sound exists as pressure waves that are traveling through a medium. Smell and taste, they come from chemical molecules that are interacting with specialized receptors. And touch comes from physical forces acting on the body. Yet somehow, from all of these different forms of physical information, the nervous system is able to generate the rich conscious experiences that make up our perception of reality. And understanding how this happens is exactly what we want to talk about today. The first step in that process is sensation. Sensation refers to the detection of stimuli and then the conversion of that information into signals that can actually be processed by the nervous system. Now, at this stage, the nervous system's acting as a detector of sorts, and its job is to identify that a stimulus exists and then translate it into a form that the brain can understand. The second step is perception. Perception refers to the organization, the interpretation, and then the conscious experience of sensory information. Once those sensory signals make it to the brain, they're going to be analyzed and they're going to be compared with previous experiences and they're going to be integrated with information from other sensory systems. And then ultimately, they're going to be assigned meaning. And it is this process that allows us to recognize a face and understand spoken language and appreciate music. At this point, I really want to emphasize that perception isn't just a passive reflection of the outside world. The brain isn't functioning like a camera that records reality exactly as it exists. No. Instead, perception is an active process of interpretation. The brain continuously uses incoming sensory information, prior knowledge, memories, and context to construct its understanding of your environment. This is actually one reason why perception can sometimes be fooled. Optical illusions are a great example. In optical illusions, the sensory information that's reaching the eyes remains the same. But what changes is how the brain interprets that information. The sensation is the same, but the perception is what's different. And that tells us something important because a lot of what we experience as reality is not determined only by the sensory information that's entering the nervous system. It is also very much shaped by how the brain processes that information. Now, this raises an important question. How does sensation actually begin? The answer is specialized cells known as sensory receptors. Sensory receptors are specialized neurons that respond to particular forms of environmental stimuli. Different receptors have evolved to detect different kinds of stimuli, and that's what allows us to gather information about the world around us. Let's start with vision. In the retina of the eye, there are specialized cells called photoreceptors. And like the name suggests, these receptors respond to light. More specifically, they detect electromagnetic radiation within the visible region of the spectrum, and they convert that information into neural signals. Without photoreceptors, vision wouldn't be possible. Of course, not all sensory information comes in the form of light. We also need a way to detect physical forces that are acting on the body. That's where mechanoreceptors come in. These receptors respond when tissues are stretched, compressed, or physically deformed. In the skin, these allow us to detect things like touch, pressure, and vibration. There are also similar receptors that are found in the inner ear, and they respond to sound vibrations and they help us maintain balance and equilibrium. The body also needs a way to keep track of temperature. If the environment becomes too hot or too cold, that information has to be detected and then communicated to the nervous system. Thermoreceptors do that job and make this possible. These receptors respond to an increase and decrease in temperature, and they help us monitor both our surroundings and the internal temperature of the body. Another type of receptor that you should know is the nociceptor. Nociceptors respond to stimuli that are associated with actual or potential tissue damage. For instance, if you accidentally touch a hot stove or you step on something sharp, the nociceptors are part of the system that alerts the nervous system that something is wrong. And we experience that response as pain. And even though pain is definitely not enjoyable, maybe to some, it does serve an incredibly important biological function because it helps protect us from injury and it helps us seek out help when something doesn't feel right. Next, I want to mention that some sensory systems work a little differently because they rely on the detection of chemical molecules. That leads us to chemoreceptors. Chemoreceptors interact with molecules in the environment, and those interactions provide raw information that eventually gives rise to the sensations of smell and taste. We also have osmoreceptors. These receptors monitor the concentration of dissolved particles within body fluids. And in this way, Osmoreceptors play a role in regulating water balance, in helping maintain homeostasis, and also in helping generate the sensation of thirst when the body needs more water. Now, even though all of these receptors that we just covered respond to different kinds of stimuli, they're all still taking information from the environment and then converting it into a form that neurons can transmit and the brain can process. That conversion process is known as transduction. Transduction is the process where sensory receptors convert information from the environment into neural signals. In other words, transduction is what allows things like light, sound, temperature, pressure, and chemical molecules to be translated into the electrical signals that neurons use to communicate. And once that conversion happens, the information can then travel through the nervous system to the brain. In the brain, that information is going to be processed and interpreted. And honestly, I think there's something genuinely fascinating about that idea. Everything you've ever seen, heard, tasted, smelled, or felt has ultimately reached your brain as patterns of neural activity. Your brain never directly experiences these stimuli. Instead, it receives electrical signals generated by sensory receptors, and it uses those signals to construct the world that we experience every day. The next thing we want to talk about is thresholds. Up to this point, we've talked about how sensory receptors detect different kinds of stimuli. But here's the next important idea. A stimulus doesn't just automatically get detected just because it exists. In order for sensory systems to respond, that stimulus actually has to be strong enough. That minimum level for it to be detected is called the absolute threshold. The absolute threshold is the lowest intensity of a stimulus that can be detected by a sensory system. So, for vision, we might ask how dim a light can be before we can no longer detect it. For hearing, we might ask how quiet a sound can be before it disappears from our awareness. For smell, we might ask how low the concentration of an odor molecule has to be before we can no longer smell it. And the key idea is that if a stimulus is below the absolute threshold, then the sensory system's not likely to detect it. It may still physically exist in the environment, it's just not strong enough to produce a reliable sensory response. But I do want to point out that detection is not always the same thing as conscious awareness. Sometimes sensory information is detected by the nervous system, but it still might not become something that you consciously notice. And that brings us to the threshold of conscious perception. The threshold of conscious perception refers to the level at which a stimulus is strong enough to enter conscious awareness. For example, your nervous system is constantly receiving information from your clothing, the chair you're sitting on, the background sounds in your room, and even small changes in your body position. But you're not consciously focused on all of that information at every moment. So, the stimulus can be present and it can even be detected, but it has to reach a certain level of processing or importance before you start to consciously recognize it. Now, there's another type of threshold that we need to learn about, and that is the difference threshold. The difference threshold is the smallest change in a stimulus that a person can still detect. This is also called the just noticeable difference because it is the smallest difference that is just barely noticeable. For example, imagine you're holding a backpack that weighs like 10 pounds. If I add in one paper clip to it, you probably wouldn't notice the difference. But if I go ahead and add in a heavy textbook, that's something you'll definitely notice. And somewhere between those two changes is the minimum change you can actually detect. What makes the difference threshold interesting is that it's not a fixed amount. It depends on the intensity of the original stimulus. If you're holding something very light, then a small added weight can still be noticeable. But if you're already carrying something very, very heavy, then a small added weight might not be noticeable at all. And this relationship is described by Weber's law. Weber's law tells us that the change needed to detect a difference is proportional to the original intensity of the stimulus. So, the stronger the starting stimulus is, the larger the change usually has to be before we notice it. This is why turning up the volume by one click feels very different depending on where you started with the volume. If the volume's already silent, one click might be noticeable. But if the volume's already very loud, that one click increase might not even register or barely register. But alas, thresholds are not only determined by the strength of the stimulus. Perception's also affected by factors like attention, expectations, and background noise. This brings us to signal detection theory. Signal detection theory studies how internal and external factors influence thresholds of sensation and perception. In other words, signal detection theory studies how people detect a stimulus when there is uncertainty. In real life, sensory information is rarely perfectly clear. There's usually some amount of noise in the background, and that noise could be literal noise, like trying to hear your name in a crowded room, or it can be internal noise, like being tired or anxious or expecting something to happen. So the question becomes this: when a signal is present, does the person detect it or not? And in thinking about this, there are four possible outcomes. If the signal is present and the person says that it is present, that is a hit. If the signal is present but the person fails to detect it, that is a miss. If the signal's absent but the person thinks that it's present, that's a false alarm. And if the signal is absent and the person correctly says it's absent, then this is a correct rejection. A good example is waiting for an important text message. If your phone actually vibrates and you notice it, that's a hit. If your phone vibrates but you miss it, that's a miss. If you think your phone vibrated when it didn't, that's a false alarm. If your phone doesn't vibrate and you correctly don't check it, that's a correct rejection. And this shows us that perception is not just about stimulus intensity. It also depends on how the brain sets its decision criteria. If you are really expecting the signal, you may be more likely to say, yes, I detected it. But that also increases your chances of false alarms. If you're more cautious, though, you might have fewer false alarms, but you can also miss weak signals. So, thresholds give us a way to think about the minimum stimulus needed for detection, the minimum level needed for conscious awareness, and the minimum change needed to notice a difference. Then, signal detection theory adds one more layer by showing that detection is also shaped by context, expectations, and decision making. And with that, we've completed this objective and we're ready to move into the next where we're going to learn about vision and the eyes. I'm going to save that for the next video. I hope this has been helpful thus far. Please let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns down below. Other than that, good luck, happy studying, and have a beautiful, beautiful day, future doctors.